Hello, I'm Bruce Collins. This is my channel, Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff. And I also have another channel called The Bruce Collins Show, where we have a lot of great interviews and a lot of great comedy. And you can check that out. I hope you subscribe to both The Bruce Collins Show and this channel, Bruce Collins Reacts and Stuff. But today, we're going to talk about time travelers who might actually be real. Let's check it out. Okay, here we go. Let's time travel.
The Internet Prophet. In the year 2000, a user named John Titor appeared on internet forums with an extraordinary claim. He was a soldier from the year 2036, sent back in time on a mission to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. What followed was 2 years of the most detailed, technically sophisticated, and unnervingly accurate predictions about the future ever recorded online. Titor didn't just claim to be a time traveler, he provided technical blueprints for his time machine, detailed how temporal displacement worked, and explained the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics with a precision that stunned physicists. His machine, he claimed, was a General Electric C204 time displacement unit, installed in a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette, later upgraded to a 1987 Chevrolet Suburban for better cargo capacity. But it was his predictions that made the world pay attention. Writing in 2000 and 2001, Titor accurately predicted that no weapons of mass destruction would be found in Iraq. He warned that CERN's Large Hadron Collider would create miniature black holes, something CERN didn't confirm until 2008. He described a future where people would carry powerful computers in their pockets and communicate through social networks. Years before
Art Bell covered this case quite a bit on his program years ago on Coast to Coast AM.
smartphones and social media became ubiquitous. Most chilling of all, he predicted a second American Civil War beginning around 2005, sparked by civil liberties violations after a major terrorist attack. He described federal police actions, the suspension of constitutional rights, and a growing divide between urban and rural populations. Writing months before 9/11, he warned that Americans would willingly trade freedom for security after experiencing domestic terrorism on an unprecedented scale. Titor's technical knowledge was equally impressive. He accurately described how the IBM 5100 contained hidden functions that could debug mainframe code, information IBM didn't publicly acknowledge until years later. A former IBM engineer named Bob Dubke confirmed that only a handful of people knew about these capabilities when Titor was posting. The photographs he provided showed his alleged time machine, complete with detailed technical specifications and what appeared to be an authentic manual. The images demonstrated a level of sophistication that would have been extremely difficult to fake in 2000. Then, as suddenly as he had appeared, John Titor vanished from the forums in March 2001, claiming his mission was complete. His final post read, "I'll be leaving this world line shortly, and this will be my final post. There are only a few safety items I need to check before I leave." 15 years later, many of Titor's predictions about surveillance, social media, and political polarization in America have come to pass with disturbing accuracy. Was John Titor an elaborate hoax, or was he exactly what he claimed to be? A time traveler from a world not so different from our own? The Man Out of Time. On a busy Thursday evening in June 1950, a man suddenly appeared in the middle of Times Square, New York City. He was struck by a taxi and killed instantly. What made this traffic fatality extraordinary wasn't the accident itself, but what police found when they searched the body. The victim's name was Rudolph Fentz, according to the identification in his wallet. But everything else about him was impossible. He was wearing a black frock coat and button shoes that looked like they belonged in the 1870s. Yet the clothes appeared brand new, without a trace of age or wear. In his pockets, investigators found brass buttons, a copper token good for a beer at a tavern that had been demolished in 1876, and
What's even weirder is that detective has two right arms.
$70 in old banknotes, money that had been out of circulation for decades. Most puzzling of all was what he didn't have. No identification cards from the modern era, no wallet contents that would connect him to 1950, and no signs of mental illness or confusion that might explain his anachronistic appearance. Witnesses described him as looking around in bewilderment, as if seeing Times Square for the first time, before stepping directly into traffic. Captain Hubert V. Rime of the Missing Persons Bureau decided to investigate. What he discovered defied all logic. In the missing persons files from 1876, he found an entry for one Rudolph Fentz, age 29, who had disappeared without a trace while taking an evening walk near his home. The missing man's description matched the accident victim perfectly. Ream dug deeper and found more impossible evidence. In the 1939 New York phone directory, there was a listing for a Rudolph Fentz Jr. When contacted, the man claimed his father had vanished mysteriously in 1876 during a walk and was never seen again. He provided a photograph of his father. It was identical to the man killed in Times Square, down to the smallest detail. The case was quietly filed away and forgotten, deemed too strange for public consumption. But retired police officers who worked the case continued to whisper about it for decades. They had witnessed something that challenged everything they understood about the nature of time and reality. Was Rudolph Fentz a victim of some temporal anomaly that transported him 74 years into the future? Or was this an elaborate hoax designed to fool the authorities? The physical evidence, the perfectly preserved 19th century clothing, the authentic period money, and the missing persons records suggest something far stranger than anyone was willing to publicly admit. The Versailles Times slip.
Okay, so I was intrigued by this one, so I just looked it up. And Google is telling me Rudolph Fentz is the subject of a popular long-standing urban legend about a 19th century man who supposedly time traveled to 1950s New York. He is actually a fictional character from Jack Finney's 1951 science fiction short story, I'm Scared, which was later incorrectly circulated as a real-life mystery.
On August 10th, 1901, two respectable English academics, Eleanor Jordan and Charlotte Moberly, took what they believed would be a simple afternoon stroll through the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. What they experienced instead became one of the most documented and credible cases of time travel ever recorded. The women, both highly educated and skeptical by nature, were exploring the grounds when they began to notice something was wrong. The atmosphere became oppressive and dreamlike. The colors around them seemed to fade, and an inexplicable feeling of melancholy settled over them. They encountered several people dressed in 18th century clothing, who seemed to be going about their daily business as if it were perfectly normal. Near the Petit Trianon, they saw a woman in period dress sitting on the grass, sketching. She looked up at them with an expression of mild curiosity before returning to her work. Later research would reveal that the woman perfectly matched historical descriptions of Marie Antoinette, down to her distinctive hairstyle and facial features. The location where they saw her was precisely where the doomed queen was known to spend her afternoons in the summer of 1789. They encountered gardeners working with tools that belonged to a different century, saw buildings that had been demolished decades earlier, and walked down paths that no longer existed in 1901. Most striking was their interaction with a man in a dark cloak who warned them away from a certain direction. A man they would later realize bore an exact resemblance to the Count de Vaudreuil, one of Marie Antoinette's courtiers. When they returned to their hotel that evening, both women were shaken by the experience. Being academics, they began a methodical investigation that lasted over
I'm more shaken by the tiny detective on my windowsill.
a decade. They interviewed historians, studied 18th century maps of Versailles, and compared their memories to historical records. Everything they had seen and everyone they had encountered could be verified as historically accurate to the summer of 1789, just months before the French Revolution would change everything forever. What made their account particularly credible was that they conducted their research separately, writing independent accounts before comparing notes. Their descriptions matched not only each other, but also historical records that weren't publicly available in 1901. They had knowledge of architectural details, garden layouts, and even specific individuals that they couldn't have accessed through conventional research. The French authorities took their claims seriously enough to launch their own investigation. They confirmed that the women had accurately described features of Versailles that had existed in 1789 but had been changed or removed by 1901. The paths they walked, the buildings they saw, and even the placement of specific trees matched historical plans that were stored in private archives. Moberly and Jourdain spent 10 years researching and verifying their experience before publishing An Adventure in 1911. Their account sparked international debate and drew both support from psychical researchers and skepticism from materialist scientists. But the physical evidence, their impossible knowledge of 18th century Versailles, remained unexplained. Had
Huh.
two English academics somehow slipped back in time and witnessed Marie Antoinette in her final summer of freedom? Or had they experienced some form of psychic vision so detailed and accurate that it rivaled actual time travel? The mystery endures, leaving us to wonder whether the past sometimes bleeds through into the present in ways we don't yet understand. The Philadelphia Sailor. In the summer of 1955, an astronomer and UFO researcher named Morris Jessup received a letter that would change everything he thought he knew about the nature of reality. The letter was from a man who called himself Carl Allen, later known as Carlos Miguel Allende, and it contained one of the most extraordinary claims in modern history. Allen claimed to have witnessed the U.S. Navy's attempts to achieve invisibility through electromagnetic field manipulation in 1943. According to his account, he was serving aboard the merchant vessel SS Andrew Furuseth when he observed an experiment conducted on the USS Eldridge at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard. The experiment, Allen claimed, had worked far too well. Instead of simply becoming invisible to radar, Allen testified that the entire destroyer had vanished from sight before reappearing in a dramatic flash of light. But the crew, he claimed, had been forever changed by the experience. Some had become partially invisible and couldn't turn it off. Others had developed the ability to walk through solid walls, an ability they couldn't control. Most disturbing of all, some had become unstuck in time. Allen described meeting sailors from the Eldridge in bars around Philadelphia who would suddenly freeze mid-sentence, becoming invisible and inaudible to everyone around them for minutes at a time. When they returned, they claimed to have been somewhere else entirely, sometimes in the past, sometimes in the future. They spoke of experiencing their entire lives out of sequence, of being unable to control when and where they existed in time. One sailor, Allen claimed, had simply walked through the wall of a bar and was never seen again. Another had gotten stuck halfway through a wall and died horribly when the effect wore off. The most disturbing case involved a sailor who aged 30 years in a matter of minutes during one of these temporal episodes, dying of old age in front of his terrified shipmates. The Navy, according to Allen, had hushed up the entire experiment and transferred the surviving crew to different ships, but the effects couldn't be contained. The sailors continued to experience temporal displacement for months afterward, appearing and disappearing at random, aging rapidly during episodes, and gradually losing their sanity as they became unstuck from linear time. What made Allen's account compelling wasn't just the detail, but the scientific accuracy of his descriptions of electromagnetic field theory and relativity, knowledge that would have been extremely difficult for a merchant marine to acquire in 1943. His understanding of unified field theory and space-time manipulation was decades ahead of publicly available scientific knowledge. When researchers attempted to track down Allen's claims, they discovered that official records of the Philadelphia experiment had been classified or destroyed. The USS Eldridge's logs from October 1943 were mysteriously missing. Most of the crew members had died or disappeared, and those few who could be contacted refused to discuss their experiences aboard the ship. But some evidence remained. Several Philadelphia area newspapers from late 1943 contained brief mentions of strange incidents involving military personnel who had appeared suddenly in bars and restaurants, acting confused and disoriented before vanishing again. Medical records from naval hospitals showed an unusual number of psychological cases involving temporal displacement, delusions among destroyer crews from the Philadelphia yard. Was Carl Allen a delusional fabricator spinning elaborate tales, or was he one of the few witnesses to humanity's first accidental achievement of time travel? The missing records, the classified nature of the project, and the consistent details of temporal displacement make this one of the most compelling cases for the possibility that time travel isn't just theoretical. It's been accidentally achieved and covered up. At the Chaplin anomaly, in 1920,
Okay, what do you make of these stories? Let us know in the comments below. Do you believe time travel is possible, and has it already occurred? Again, we've been looking at a new channel called Weird Why. The video is 10 time travelers who might actually be real. I thought it was interesting. What do you think? Comment below. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.